Women's rights, a social movement. The America is known as the land of the free, home of the brave, and where opportunities are plentiful. People from every aspect of the world come to America to be able to make their dreams come true. What they do not know is that the American dream is harder for some than for others. This is because white male historically have held all the power and were afforded all the opportunities. But times are changing. Over the years, there has been a shift in power, and although being a white male still has privileges, other groups are now holding power positions and are being exposed to more opportunities. How is it that minorities are able to gain these opportunities and to challenge those in power? One way that it is accomplished is through a social movement. A social movement is a collective attempt to bring about change in certain social institutions or to create entirely new order. In the 20th century, there have been some great social movements. Civil rights, women's rights, and gay rights are just a few that have received national attention. In each of these movements, leaders and believers had to fight against society's norms. Some have taken longer, others have been more dangerous, and for some, they are still fighting the fight. But each is considered important to those who believed that society needed to change. Women's rights is one of those social movements that is still fighting the fight. Women have made great strides towards equality, but still more needs to be done. According to InfoPlease.com, the first Women's Rights Convention was held in Seneca Falls, New York in 1848. 68 women and 32 men signed the Declaration of Sentiment. One of these ladies at the first Women's Rights Convention was Elizabeth Stanton. It was Mrs. Stanton who wrote the Declaration of Sentiment that was signed in 1848. Among other things, she wanted women to have the right to own property, to be able to vote, and above all else, just to be equal to men. Elizabeth was different from women of her era because she was educated. However, even with education, Elizabeth was still unable to escape discrimination. Even though she had won several academic awards in schools, she was not permitted to attend Union College with her male classmates. She had to attend the Troy Female Cemetery. It was these setbacks and her father's favoritism of her brother that influenced Elizabeth's ideas and laid the foundation for her desires to achieve the same rights as men. Susan Anthony co-founded the National Women's Suffrage Association with Elizabeth Stanton. Like Stratton, Susan was also educated. However, Susan received her education at home. Anthony's father was very upset when he found out that his daughter was not getting the same type of education that the boys in her schools were getting. So he took her out of school and began teaching her himself. Susan served as president of the National Women's Suffrage for more than 20 years, from 1869 to 1890. In 1851, Susan met Elizabeth, and together they founded the women's suffrage movement in 1869. Even though both of these ladies gave so much to the movement, like many great leaders of society, they never lived to see what they were fighting for. It wasn't until 1920 that the United States Constitution was amended, giving women the right to vote. However, the women movement did not end there. Even though women could vote, they still held no political power and were considered second-class citizens. It would take a little over 40 years for the women's movement to take another step forward. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy established the President's Commission on the Status of Women and appoints Eleanor Roosevelt as chairwoman. Finally, women had a little political power, and things began to slowly change. In 1966, the National Organization of Women, NOW, was founded by a group of feminists, including Betty Friedan. Betty Friedan received her BA from Smith College, and in 1942 she spent a year at Berkeley working with famed psychiatrist Erik Erikson. It was Betty Friedan who was responsible for the reemergence of the feminist movement. She realized that their agenda needed to be vamped up and offered a vision to help excite her followers. Like Stanton, Friedan developed a statement of purpose, which can be read in its entirety at the National Organization for Women's website at www.now.org. Among other things, she wanted better pay for women, she wanted better education, and she wanted more representation in government. Basically, Freeman was still fighting for the same things that Stanton was in 1848. The 60s and 70s was a turning point for the women's movement. Many laws were enacted to help women have equality, and they included the 1967 Executive Order 11375, which expanded on President Johnson's policy that forbid discrimination based on gender. And as a result, federal agencies and contractors must take active measures to ensure that women as well as minorities have the same education and employment opportunities as their white males. In 1973, as a result of Roe v. Wade, the Supreme Court said women had the right to safe abortions if they wanted it. Also in 73, the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, which prohibited discrimination from creditors based on race, sex, marital status, religion, national origin, age, or if you were getting public assistance. In 1974, the Supreme Court ruled that employers could not justify paying women lower wages because what they traditionally received as the going market rate. The political arena was also changing, and in 1984, Geraldine Ferraro became Walter Mondale's running mate for the Democratic Party. Although they did not win, she made history with her nomination. And in 1992, California elected two women, Dianne Feinstein and Barbara Boxer, to the United States Senate. And in 2002, Nancy Pelosi was sworn in to the House Democratic Whip, the highest-ranking leadership position ever held by a woman in the United States Congress. At that time, later she was named Minority Leader. And in 2006, when the Democrats took control of the United States Congress, Nancy Pelosi was elevated to the position of Speaker of the House, the third highest-ranking office in the United States government, making her the highest-ranking female at that time in U.S. political history. And in 2008, Hillary Clinton reached second place in the Democratic Party nomination, winning 1,726.5 delegate votes, and more primaries than any other woman in history, with 21 states and more than 60 million votes. The political Democratic Party race between Clinton and Obama was the closest in history, with her actually winning 48.03 of the popular vote to his 47.43 vote. Movement has come a long way since Elizabeth Stanton wrote her Declaration of Sentiments. Women have begun to gain political power. That is needed in order to make real, tangible changes. Women will not stop the fight until all women are afforded the same rights as men. Although some changes have been made and some ground has been gained, women are still often seen as subservient to men, and they are in jobs where they find themselves stuck before a glass ceiling. Betty Freeman said it best: "There is a problem, and it has no name. It is simply the fact that American women are kept from growing to their full human capacities. This is taking a far greater toll on the physical and mental health of our country than any known disease."